What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hirsch Redpun, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. With me today on Truth Tastes Funny is Jeff Frazier. Jeff's a decorated Army veteran, husband, and the father of 10 beautiful children. He's now the founder and board member of a billion-dollar-plus global clinical research technology company. And he's served as founder or leader within several Haiti-based NGOs that have driven measurable progress in Haiti. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff and more. He also is the host of the Stimpack podcast. And if you get a chance, check out his 43 Days of Freedom series, because it chronicles the time during which he was a prisoner. And well, Jeff, I'll let you share some of the context of that, because it's a fascinating story. And in the podcast, you and your wife both kind of recount your experiences during this time. But Jeff, well, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that, Hirsch. Appreciate you having me on. Yeah, to answer your question, so we have this Stimpack podcast. It's super nerdy. Like the season 1 and now season 3 are kind of academic think tanky focused thing. But we took this break in season 2 because I was kidnapped in Haiti while doing a food distribution mission. And I was trapped, unfortunately, for 43 days, but my wife ended up being my spectacular hero and building a team to rescue me and get me out. Most people think that an experience like that, the FBI and the CIA kind of put their capes on and knock on your door and set up an operation post in your living room until you're home. And that's just not what happens when maybe that's the experience if you get kidnapped in the US, but most certainly is not when you're kidnapped in Haiti. And so my wife had to put this team together. And so we decided on the 1-year anniversary, which was this past spring. So I was taken in 2023, April 2023. And on the anniversary, so April 2024, we told our story essentially one day at a time in real time. So we ended up collapsing some of those days. So I think it's 18 episodes that cover the 43 days experience.
Yeah. Well, tell us what got you started on this mission in the first place.
Thank you. That's a good question. So in circa 2013, 2014, I got real active with an organization called Our Rescue. I just recently was put on the board there, but they focus on rescuing child sex slaves from around the world. And I got real passionate about that cause and started to, as my career progressed, have more and more time to be a little more operational. And around 2018, my wife and I went down to Haiti for the first time, initially to help with aftercare facilities. So once you rescue a child from an exploitative environment, you got to put them somewhere. And so my wife and I went down to kind of help with that, right? We toured a bunch of facilities and whatnot, and we just got a heart for Haiti. And so when I retired, we sold my Thread, the med tech company, in 2019. We moved our family out here to South Florida from California. We're from California initially. And so we moved out here and started going down to Haiti about twice a month and learn the language and kind of get involved and see what good we could do.
Yeah, now we're recording this at a time when there's a lot of focus on Haitian immigrants to the United States, and some sensational aspects around it. But would you be able to share some of your insight into what the migrant community and communities in the U.S. are dealing with?
Sure. And I'm not an expert there in immigrant issues here. I'm learning more and more as I'm a volunteer bishop in our church congregation here in South Florida, and we have a lot of Haitians there. My 3 adoptive children are part of that group, but we teach English classes. And so I know a little bit about their plight, and it's a harrowing one at that. But I can tell you that those stories in Ohio were absolutely absurd. They have no basis in reality whatsoever.
And I think a lot of us, know that. But I think the way I look at some of these things are the nonsense around it, hopefully washes over us to some degree, but it does allow us to then go, okay, well, what's really going on? What's like, just
Yeah.
as you said, you alluded to, and we'll circle back to this now, just as you alluded to the fact that when you were kidnapped in Haiti, the default might be for us to think, oh, well, our government is going to just kind of take care of that,
Yeah.
So, in a capsule version, because I told you I started listening to the series, the 43 Days of Freedom series on your podcast, and I'm really excited to kind of dig into it and hear the whole thing. But in a capsule version, maybe share a little bit of what happened.
Sure, sure. And just to be clear, it's 43 days to freedom,
To
not 40,
freedom.
because
Yeah. Oh,
43
that's
days
right.
of freedom
Yeah,
would have
that's
been
right.
wonderful.
That's right. It would have been wonderful. I'm sorry about that. And I
No,
and
you're
I
fine. You're
yeah,
fine.
I misstated that.
No, you're
Yeah,
fine.
43
So
days to
yeah,
freedom.
the summary is I mentioned I was doing a food distribution mission down there. And just for those who are not familiar with Haiti's plight right now, their president got assassinated in 2021 and never replaced him. There's 1,000 reasons that we can talk about in season 3. Actually, of my podcast, we'll talk a lot about that. But the governance situation just continued to devolve, and wherein you normally have politicians that would step in and fill the power vacuum, whether through nefarious means or legitimate, you typically get a politician to step in. In this case, they didn't. And instead, the gangs filled that power vacuum on a local level. So at this point now, we're in September of 24. You got the gangs control about 80, maybe 85% of the capital.
Wow.
And it's many different gangs, but they run the place, and they're destroying the country. And part of that is people are starving, right? And in some cases dying of thirst, right? The fuel for the country has to be imported, and that comes through the ports, and those ports are often controlled by gangs. And in April of 23, when I was there, when I was taken, we were doing a food distribution mission there, because when you don't let the fuel come in, not only do you not get to drive your car around, you don't get to power your well pumps that bring the water out of the ground.
Right.
So people die very quickly, either from thirst or from cholera, because they have to drink filthy water. So anyway, that was the situation. It's still the situation now, but it certainly was the situation then, in 2023 when I was going in there. So we had to bring food to the south of the country, and normally I would just fly down there and meet the food for safety reasons. But we couldn't do that because most of the pilots had shut down for safety reasons. They wouldn't fly. And so we still had to get down there. I had to drive. I knew I had to drive through gang territory. So we had to make a deal with a particular gang for safe passage. They just call it a toll. And we pulled up to that toll booth. It's about maybe 40 minutes from the airport that day that I landed. And very tense situation passing that toll booth. Hey, I hope this business arrangement holds up, right? And you
Hmm.
roll, the toll booth is a stretch, right? You're talking
Yeah.
umbrella and lawn chairs and AK-47s and AR-15s, right?
Yeah.
And luckily we get through that safely. We get to our food distribution. We do that for a few days. And on our way back is when I was picked up. They just, for whatever reason, couldn't handle the temptation and took me.
So who took you, to your knowledge? What was?
It's a gang. I mean, I know the gang exactly. It's in Martissan, a place called Martissan. It's a main kind of thoroughfare that runs east-west. And then they handed me off to a different gang called the Tilapli gang in Grand Ravine. And if you're ever looking at the map, it's really easy to find where I was, because there's very few green spots in and around Grand Ravine and Martizan. Even near Port-au-Prince, there's two big green patches, and I'm the one on the right. That's where I spent my 43 days, and lots of harrowing times in there, where my wife built a team and came to my rescue. I escaped after a failed ransom attempt on day 28, or the night, like early morning hours of day 29, and but was recaptured a few hours later, a couple miles away, about a mile away, and brought back. And that's when the real trouble started. So day 29 to 43 are by far my longest days.
So those were as in terms of like a repercussion for your trying
Yeah.
to
Yeah, they weren't
escape.
happy. They weren't happy
Oh,
about me leaving, and they made it real clear.
wow.
Yeah.
And what kind of interaction did you have with your captors?
What do you mean?
I mean, other than them torturing you
Yeah.
but I mean, like, were you isolated? Were you,
Yeah, good question. So the way that they do it is they kind of go on a shopping spree, and they get a bunch of captives on a particular day or within a couple of days, and then over time they free them all, right? As they do the business deals, right?
Mhm.
Transaction after transaction, and then they got down. I was the last one. So there was 13 on day one, and then my last co-captive was gone on day 35, and then it was just me from that point on.
And they look at this simply as a fundraising
Yep.
expedition.
Yeah, it's just money. Well, and also terror too, right?
Right.
They use it as power and
To stay
influence.
to stay in power and be
Yeah.
feared.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And then also to get what they want. So there can be political kidnapping and that kind of thing.
yeah. Okay. And what are some of the means that your wife used in building a team, using a team? What did she, how did
Hmm.
she do this?
Yeah, I know you can imagine getting that phone call. I mean, my wife's an awesome lady. When I first met her, I was immediately attracted to her power. Right? She's got an air about her, which I
Yeah.
absolutely have loved. But she's very much a housewife. She takes care of our at that time 7 children. We hadn't received our adopted children yet. Uh,
Right.
but I mean, she does all the things that you think, right? She drives to soccer practice and volunteers at church and just very much what you would imagine. Goes to the
Yeah.
gym and she's amazing, but there's not who you would think would figure out how to rescue me from Haiti, right?
Yeah.
So she gets that phone call the night of day one. I was taken around lunchtime, and then she doesn't hear from anybody till about 9:30. She's pretty sure there's a problem, but this is not rare. I mean, I've been down to
Right.
Haiti many, many, many times, right? Probably 100 times, and it's not rare for me to get outside of cell service, right? So
Right.
she tries not to scare herself. And so she had just been kind of distracting her mind that day and was hoping to hear from me soon. And the first phone call was from the US Embassy in Haiti. And they said, "Hey, we've got pretty good intel that your husband was taken today." And, she just collapsed on the floor and started sobbing. And unfortunately, my oldest daughter walked in on that, in the moment.
How old are your kids?
She's about to turn 20 in a couple days or a
Oh.
couple weeks. And then my youngest adopted child is 4.
Okay, so
But
you're
every age in between.
yeah, of course. And so she kind of walked in on this scenario, and I'm wanting to ask questions that everybody
Oh, feel
doesn't
free.
ask, but I think that the telling of this story, I think that the intrigue of it is good for the cause, is good for people to be intrigued, want to listen to the story on the podcast, want to, and then we're going to get to, how to, which is a purpose of the podcast as well, how to get involved, how to get engaged, and
Sure.
so forth. But now what wheels kind of go into motion, because as you mentioned, the captors want something. And so those first 29 days, what was happening during
Yeah,
that
that's a good
time?
question. So I've been doing the Haiti thing for a long time, and I certainly consider myself an expert on Haitian issues and Haitian security, ironically. And I didn't at that time know anyone who would be more well equipped to negotiate on my behalf than me.
Uh-huh. Right.
And so I presumed I was going to be my own negotiator because I couldn't conceive of anyone else who could jump in and do that on my behalf.
Right.
Uh, you know, think about, all the factors that go into knowing how to negotiate on someone's behalf, right? You need to speak the language, which I do, and I don't know anybody back here who could also do that. Certainly not my wife. So you have to speak the language, know the culture, understand the environment that you're in. Like what are these guys like? They would make huge demands, like $2 million, or we're going to kill you right now with a gun in your face, right? Like, but and
Wow.
that's a super scary thing. But I didn't for 1 minute think they really thought they were going to get $2 million, right? And I could see that because I was in
Right.
the room, right? And so that, and I'm aware how badly I want to get out for my family, and
Mhm.
I know how little I value money, right? And how
Right.
much more interested I am in stopping the trauma that's happening at home.
Hmm.
So who's more qualified than me to negotiate on my behalf, right? And I initially did not realize the absolute stupidity of that thinking, but it became very real when I realized that all they had to do is to begin to torture me, and that number would go up to an obscene amount that was inappropriate. And it's inappropriate for two reasons. One is they get a bunch of money from me to go buy guns and bullets, which they'll use and burn up in a week and a half, right,
Right.
of fighting. These guys were in war. Every day I was in captivity throughout the day. Like the weapons never stopped, right, throughout the day. It was just
Right.
pop, 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 pop. Right? Like that sound was pervasive throughout my experience. Now, I'm aware that that's where my money is going to go if I pay big and fast, right? I also know that whatever number I pay is on the head of every American who's currently working in
Right.
Haiti, right?
Right.
And while I know that when I'm in captivity, it did not occur to me that I was going to be incapable of keeping that number low because you have no bargaining strength with a gun against your head.
Yeah.
And I had never literally had to do that in business. I have a lot of experience negotiating in business, and that negotiating experience had almost no value in this scenario, right? When you
Yeah.
have a literal gun to your head. So we learned pretty quickly. I learned pretty quickly that I was in a messed up negotiation scenario, but it took me about maybe 10 or 15 days to give up the reins of that. Right? Because I committed to some big numbers that luckily my wife and her team were not willing to pay because of the two factors that I just mentioned. And then a third factor, which is they'll just say, yes, take your money and make you pay again and again and again. Right.
Uh-huh. Of course.
So
Yeah.
not only was I planning to pay big and fast, I was going to have to pay again, right?
Uh-huh.
So I was woefully underqualified to negotiate on my own behalf, but that kind of noise, that miscommunication and disagreement between myself and this team that was being assembled by my wife that I didn't know anything about, right? That whole mess is just plagues our first few weeks.
And then what prompts you to try to escape?
So it was a failed ransom attempt on day 28. And I had already prepared that escape plan in the days leading up to that, just in case. It's an important kind of mental thing to
Uh-huh.
know how to get out. And so, my brain worked on it a lot and figured out how to do it, and then put a plan in place and rehearsed the plan. And then when the ransom attempt failed, that triggered the plan.
Why did it fail?
Well, they just decided to keep me. My team paid and they didn't give me up.
Oh, so they collected the ransom,
Yep.
but as you mentioned, they were like, okay, well, thanks. We'll
Let's
get
try again.
more. We'll
Yep.
get more if we keep
Yep.
asking. And so defaulted to the escape
Yeah.
attempt. And then let's go to your ultimate liberation.
Yeah.
What how did that transpire?
So because of the way the first one went down, my team demanded what's called a live exchange. So on the first one, we so the normal process that the gang would prefer is so my cell is up on a hill, right? Maybe a mile and a half away from where I was taken, and which is, by the way, their favorite drop spot. And so
Mhm.
the gang goes down there. It's in gang territory. They super own that area. And a courier comes in with your ransom and they give it to the gang. The gang goes up the hill, counts the money, then decides whether or not they're going to let you go. right? If they decide, they come and pick you up, they take you back down to the courier, and you drive away, right?
Right.
So we did all that, and they said no, and left my courier, down at the bottom. And so the second time, my team's like, hey, we're not going to play that game. You're going to bring Jeff down, right? And if we see Jeff, we'll do an exchange for the cash. And so
Right.
that, and then, I mean, that ended up blowing up in 10 different ways. And that's a very long story, but I mean, you can hear about that in the
Yeah.
podcast. But eventually I am freed, and they take me to the Marriott hotel where the FBI is now waiting for me. They did offer a ride to the airport. That
That's
was
what
all
the
they were
FBI's
providing. Yeah.
involvement
Yeah. Yeah.
involvement was.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So now, and I really do encourage people to listen to the entire story, and I will fill in the pieces for myself as well, listening to the stuff I haven't heard.
Oh, that's
And
kind of you.
yeah, no, of course. And now, in terms of your focus right now, share a little bit about that.
Sure. So my focus return was before, which is to lift Haiti. I'm trying to leverage my story to do that. And to do that properly, I need to, I say, raise an army of advocates that really understand what the situation is in Haiti, right? Why is it in so much trouble? Why is it in the plight that it's in? Why does it seem like Haiti has received a ton of foreign aid that has done no good, right? Why does it seem like a place where foreign aid dollars goes to die, right? Why? What's the problem? Why can't we lift
Yeah.
this? It's the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere by a significant margin, right? I believe Nicaragua is number two, and it's not even close, right? They're like twice the economy that Haiti is. And you can only really compare them to countries in Africa that have been warring for 2 decades, right? In terms of national wealth and income per capita, right? It's not even close. So why is that, right? Why is Haiti in such dire straits when it sits right off the coast of Florida? It's just right down there. I'm in South Florida. It's an hour and 45-minute flight from me, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? And so that's what we address, because it ought not be a poor nation. It ought to be just like all the rest of the Caribbean nations that do quite well relative to how Haiti is doing. Now, when I say quite well, I'm referring to people starving and dying. About
Yeah.
half of Haiti is currently starving. That's 5 million people. That's nothing close to anything else we have in the Western Hemisphere. So why is that? And so we discussed that as well as the remedies for that.
And what are some of the existing policies now as far as travel, as far as your access, all of that?
Yeah, so it's a level 4 do not travel country. And let me heavily encourage you not to go down. I don't even go down anymore.
Yeah.
Part of that is my relationship with the gangs now is not good, and I'm easily identified. But regardless, nobody who looks like an American should step foot in Port-au-Prince. There's a lot of ways that you can operate safely up in the north out of Cap-Haitian, but I mean, you got to be seriously motivated to be there. It's far more likely that you can get done what you need to remotely if you'd like to help in some way and support some sort of organization down there.
Right. So that's a major point to get across, which is, if you want to help, this is a great way. Your organization is a great way, but going down there, going down there is not advisable.
Unless you can travel with a double armored vehicle and a chase moto, because the chase moto behind can spot the gang vehicles coming up behind, and he has to be on radio. It's a whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which leads us to the prospects right now for the reformation of a functional government, or
Uh-huh.
what is it, what are you looking at right now?
Yeah, so actually some exciting developments in recent months. We have what's called the Presidential Council, or the CP in French. They use their acronyms the other way. It's 7 and maybe as many as 9 council members who act collectively as a president. And then they've also already appointed a prime minister, which is great. We don't have a parliament yet, so usually a prime minister will lead a parliament, but we need an election first. So you've got the CP who's in place, and the prime minister is in place, and his cabinet who are running the country currently. And that allows foreign dollars to flow in. That allows the UN, who approved last year something I supported heavily and continue to support, what's called the Multinational Security Support Mission. It's essentially a bucket of dollars that funds foreign troops, primarily from Kenya, that have come into the country to start helping the Haitian National Police beat back the gangs. It's only in its infancy. It's about a tenth of what it needs to be, but it's a start. And then the UN General Assembly, which is happening right now in New York, is talking about cranking that up and turning that into a UN general mission, which will allow for UN peacekeeping troops to come in and help free these captive Haitians who are being terrorized by these gangs.
And, one thing that you have touched on, but I think it's interesting to just restate is, we started by talking about, your affinity for the country and
Mm.
what you were feeling for it. But what was the linchpin for your transition from focusing on business and all you were doing in that sector to dedicating so much energy to helping the people of Haiti?
That's a kind question. Thanks for asking. So, I've always, I think, probably comes from a position of arrogance, but really wanted to change the whole world and thought that I could. And my focus in business was in clinical research, and that sounds fairly boring, but I really wanted to answer every human biological question. That was my quest. And that was similarly ambitious, right? And that organization continues to do that without me. I'm on the board for that. I'm a board observer for that organization, and they've gone global. And I'm very, very proud of what they've achieved and all of the medical truths that they've uncovered and have begun to integrate fascinating technologies into the clinical research space so that we can learn human truths much, much faster. So that kind of, hey, I can change the world kind of uh, audacity thing is the same muscle that I then pointed at trying to eliminate child exploitation around the world. Now, my focus, I should say, my broad scope view that encompasses my efforts with our rescue on their board is very different from the narrow focus I have in Haiti for trying to solve child exploitation in Haiti. It began on focusing specifically on child sex slavery, but once you realize that in order to rescue just one child, that then has 10 more kids right behind him to fill that demand, you have to rescue that whole country. Right? There's a level of what we call critical poverty, which is where you and your family are so poor that you are starving to death, where you will begin to consider selling your kids. Right? You're trying to keep them alive. And so if you've never been faced with the horrible choice of selling your or losing your virtue versus losing your life, that's a horrific choice to have
Yeah.
to make, right? And as soon as I observed families who are unfortunately being forced to make that choice, you start to realize, okay, that it's a poverty thing, and I just have to lift this country a little bit, right? I don't need them to build skyscrapers in Haiti, right? I'm okay with them living on dirt floors. If you go to the Dominican Republic, which is right next door, you have many, many families who live in what we would call squalor, but they're fed and they're
Yeah.
fine. These are
Yeah.
happy kids running around playing stickball and soccer, right? I,
Yeah.
I, I am not motivated to go solve that problem, like, because they don't think it's a problem, right? You cross the border, go into Haiti, and they're starving to death. It's a big problem,
Yeah.
right?
And
So we
they're
just need to
they're
lift them a little bit.
right. Well said. Well, let's close out with, here you have this beautiful family that you're thankfully reunited with. What do you share with your kids? What's a lesson that you try to impart to them?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. We definitely try to get them to appreciate what they have. I'm a big freedom guy, right? We absolutely must fight for the freedoms of others, right? The freedom to go to church at all, the freedom to go to school, the freedom to go to the hospital, the freedom to walk down your own street. And if somebody else doesn't have that freedom, I would like for my children to be willing to take on the responsibility to fight for that freedom for those people in whatever way that means. That often changes shape and size depending on your capabilities and reach and resources and all those things. But I'm a big believer that good people take on responsibilities that they could reasonably absolve themselves from. And I would love for my kids to learn to do that on behalf of others, because they grow up with everything they will ever need, right? They live in Florida, right? They're going to be just fine. But for them to spot others in need and be willing to exert effort to fight for their freedom, I would love it if my children would pick up that baton.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.